I'm Kelly with Pins and Needles Kits, and I want to do a quick little lesson on binding a quilt today. So we're just going to be putting some binding on a little table runner, and this is a no hand sewing way to do this. So I've cut my strips, and I cut 2 of them for this particular one, and you cut them 2 1/4 inches, and then you fold them in half. So I like to sew my binding onto the back of my quilt, and then I turn it to the front and then top stitch it down with my sewing machine. And if you look at this binding, I actually used a blanket stitch to sew it on, and you can use a blanket stitch, your decorative stitches, or just a regular top stitch, whatever it is that you want to do. If you wanted to sew this on, sew it down by hand, you would sew it to the top of the quilt and flip it over. So let me get started. Okay, so I'm going to turn this over to the back, and I'm going to put this with the raw edge up against the raw edge of the quilt, and using my 1/4 inch foot I'm going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I usually start somewhere in the middle of the seam so that it's easy to sew it together when I get finished. So we'll sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And as you get close to the corners, the edges, you're going to sew almost up to the edge of it and stop. And then what you want to do is you want to take this and you want to fold it back on itself so that it lines up in a straight line with the edge of the quilt. I don't know if you can see that or not. So it's going to line up at the same angle as the quilt. And then you're going to fold it back on itself, like so. All right. And then you can pin it or clip it and put it back underneath your presser foot, and then continue sewing. You'll sew to the next corner and stop. And do the same thing. You'll fold this back so that it lines up exactly like this edge here, and then fold it back on itself. And then put it back underneath the presser foot. And so you'll keep doing that all the way around, and then when we get to the other end, I'll show you how to connect them. Okay, so at the beginning, I've left quite a bit of opening here, and what you want to do is you want to fold this over on a 45-degree angle so you have a diagonal line right there. And then where you finished off, you're going to pull this across, and you're going to put it underneath there, and then you will mark the diagonal line on the bottom piece. And then you open up both of them, and you'll take your ruler, let's see if I can get it open, and you will mark, finish up on both sides, this one and then also across on this one. Okay, so after I marked where I want my seam allowance to be, I trimmed the excess fabric off so that I can sew it together easier. And then we're just going to simply take this and line these up. Like so. And then you'll pin them together. And then you'll sew them with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're going to sew on the marked line that we had marked previously. And this is on the bias, so make sure that you don't stretch it as you sew it. Okay, so then I would take this over to the ironing board, press that seam over to the side, and then press a nice crease in it, and I have my binding. Now I'll go back and sew from here to here. Okay, so once it's all pressed, then you can turn it around to the front, and you're going to fold this over so that you're just covering the stitching line, and you'll pin it down, or the Wonder Clips actually work really well for this. And then you can either top stitch it, you can blanket stitch it, whatever it is that you want to do. As you get over to each edge here with your corners, you'll fold this down, and then you'll fold the other one over it, and you'll work it so that you get a nice pretty miter there in the corner. So, and then you would pin that and then just stitch around it. So that's a really fast, easy way to do binding. We would love for you to comment and let us know what type of tutorials you would like to see. And also, if you're not a subscriber to our channel, go ahead and click on the subscribe button, and that way you'll be notified whenever we upload new videos. Thanks for watching.